Welcome back to Film Fanatics, where we talk about the movies that have us obsessed, excited, and inspired. I'm Alan.
And I'm Gaul. And today we've been sucked out of our own reality and entered the vast and unpredictable Spider Verse, where we've encountered some expert spider fans in the multiverse.
That's right, today is a very web slinger heavy episode as we celebrate the release of Spider Man Across the Spider Verse, which is in theaters right now. And we're also going to look back at Sam Raimi's rendition of the web slinger and if it still holds up.
He is your favorite insightful teenager who posts about his life in movies on Instagram and YouTube at the real Eli Hollingsworth. It's, of course, Eli Hollingsworth. Welcome to the pod.
Hey, thank you. Thank you so much for having me on.
Welcome.
We're very happy to have you, but we're also joined by a movie critic with the best sense of humor, the best rants, the best movie feuds. He's gained almost 70K followers on his YouTube channel. Adam Does Movies. Let's give a warm welcome to Adam Ollinger from Adam Does Movies.
Hello, thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you both so much for being here. It's like an exciting day for the Film Fanatics,
Oh yeah.
having both of you with us.
First of all, we'd like to talk a bit about those original Spider Man movies. Of course, Sam Raimi's Spider Man from 2002 was the first movie that brought Spider Man into, I guess, mainstream popular culture in a way. Before we had the MCU, we had X Men, and then we had this movie. And we'd like to start. Let's hear first, maybe from Eli, a bit about your history of this movie and where you feel it holds up when you watch it now.
Well, so I'm like as you said, I'm 16. I'm a teenager, right? So I didn't like these movies are like my Spider-Man. I would say is probably Tom Holland. That's my generation's Spider-Man. That's what like my first introduction was probably Tom Holland Spider-Man, and maybe even the cartoons as well. But the Raimi trilogy, like looking back on it now, probably a lot of kids. I know a lot of kids my age don't love the Raimi trilogy just because of like like you guys know all the memes, like all the meme culture, the silliness. There's some aspects of it that are kind of like, but yeah. So I watched the first three the Raimi movies with my brother and my dad. Like we watched them all like a few years ago, Christmas like something. And for me personally, I still think they really do hold up. It's really easy for me to like take a movie on its own terms, see what the filmmaker is trying to do with it, like what is trying to do, and look at the time, that it was made in, like the culture, the time of that era. That is what that superhero movies were. The formula had not been, so saturated as it is today, where we get hundreds of different superhero movies. We have superhero movies to spare, like that was a very new thing at that time. So the formula was still being worked on, and I personally don't see like the maybe quote unquote campy aspects that other people my age would say about the movie. I see as just landmarks of where the society was, where the culture was, where the movies were at that time. The superhero movie formula had again not been it hadn't been fully worked out yet. So it was just it's a groundbreaking series of movies because that was the first one to do that superhero, or one of the first. There was Blade also, or whatever, the other superhero movies of that time. It was really the first, like you said, the first mainstream one. I saw this like reel the other day. It was of actors from Marvel who were famous because of Marvel, and then it showed a few who said it Marvel is famous because of them. And I think there's a equal feeding off for some of it. Like in some aspects, the people are just as famous because of Marvel as Marvel is because of them, right? But this movie, this trilogy with Sam Raimi, it really is what catapulted Marvel. One of the main things that catapulted Marvel into the mainstream. So I will always respect those movies in that sense. No matter what like aspects of it might be not as respected in today's standards, I still think it's very much like it's a landmark of cinema and superhero cinema at that time. So I will always respect those movies, and even watching them, I still find tons of enjoyment. I mean, they're great. They're great movies. Like I still think they hold up very well by today's standards. Even like the CGI, I still think it holds up. I think the movie is all three of them. Maybe not the third one as much, but the trilogy as a whole, I still think it's very well done. I think it's great. I think the movies are great. So, I very much long-winded answer to say I very much like these movies. to answer your
Eli
question.
doesn't like him, is what he's trying to say.
Yeah, what I'm trying to say is these are my least
Not a
favorite
good
movies I've
fan.
ever seen in my life.
Terrible
That's really what I'm
films.
trying to say. Yeah, I hate them so bad.
I'm a dinosaur compared to the rest of you, but I do have children of my own, and they really my daughter doesn't really give a crap about any of the MCU stuff, but my son Connor, he's a big fan of the Sam Raimi movies. He's also seen the Amazing Spider-Man movies and Tom Holland stuff that you guys grew up with. He's just a fan of all of them for their different reasons. You know, Sam Raimi is such a visionary director. He's off the beaten path. When you see one of his movies, you know, because he has a style to him. He has a swagger. You look at the Evil Dead franchise, even something like The Quick and the Dead has all these like zoom ins and these crazy camera angles. And yes, they're a little hokey. I do think they are a little campy, but it's an intentional camp that he brings to the table. And I think that's really what people look back on with the Spider-Man trilogy as a whole. MCU often is criticized for kind of being boilerplate and having a conveyor belt production line. All their movies kind of feel and look the same. They can't really swear. They make headlines if an F-bomb, even Spider-Man 3 with the studio interference. So I look back on them not because I'm like a massive fan, but just I appreciate when a director can see his vision to completion. And you look at something like Spider-Man 2, it's still kind of the gold standard as far as how to build up an action set piece, how to build up relationships with characters.
So actually, I grew up with the Raimi trilogy as my Spider-Man technically. So I effectively grew up with him, and I guess Bale as Batman. So yeah, I do have a very special place in my heart for this trilogy. I can understand that there's like a lot of a lot of campiness, but like Adam just said, like it's intentional camp. And even if you watch something like Doctor Strange, that in the Multiverse of Madness that Raimi directed last year, you can still see that, and I love it. I know there's a lot of people that don't, but actually some of my favorite parts of those movies are the horror campy stuff. Like you said, in Spider-Man 2, like that's the goat. That was, and for me and probably for a lot of people, still is the goat standard for a superhero flick. And that scene uh, where the arm stick control of Doctor Octopus arm stick control, and he kills a bunch of people, is like one of the campiest, best things ever put in a
It
superhero
is a
film.
great scene.
Yeah.
Some people put Spider-Man as like one of the best comic book movies of all time. And when I first got like The Avengers was a movie that got me into like live action sci-fi action movies because I was 10 at the time. My real like first exposure to the Raimi Spider-Man movie was I remember when I was young, I'd watched it on TV, and when I was really young, like before I was like a super big movie guy, I was impressed because it did a really good job of capturing the traditional comic book origin of Peter Parker in this way that was very comic book accurate and comic book friendly. But actually, when I was like first getting like passionate about those kind of movies, it was right as the Avengers came out, and if you don't remember, just 2 months after the Amazing Spider-Man was released. So I think my first exposure to like really appreciating them was when the Amazing Spider-Man came out, and I saw it in theaters with my friend on opening day. Um, and so looking back at the first Spider-Man, I think it does do a very good job of like bringing in those visuals into the big screen for the first time. I can't speak because I was born the same year this movie came out. So I can't speak for the impact it had and the excitement there was, especially Sam Raimi having come from 2 decades of respect as this auteur filmmaker and being able to put his stamp on it. So I do think some of the campiness doesn't hold up, especially I've just never been big on Toby's performance. Like especially the Peter Parker side of it, just because I feel like he's a little like not on the realistic side. And Kirsten Dunst, I didn't love either. But
Thanks for
Willem
having me on the
Dafoe,
podcast, guys. See you later.
um, but Willem Dafoe, I think he does hold up. I mean, even in comparison to a lot of the MCU villains, I feel like Willem Dafoe just did an excellent job of making like the scientist guy who then turns into this weird guy. And it held up in the campy version of a 2002 movie, but it also holds up in the MCU as we saw just a year and a half ago when he came back in No Way Home. Also, I don't know, James Franco. Like rewatching it, I don't love either, but like the whole Uncle Ben stuff, like there are some good lines. Like I missed the part where that's my problem, but some of it is like meme worthy. Some like Uncle Ben and Aunt May are good in this movie, but I think I've also been tainted by the fact that these movies are like memes, especially. So sometimes it's like it's supposed to be a serious part, but I'm thinking in my head, there's been memes about this, so maybe I'm just too young.
To be fair, that's kind of what makes it special. There's no memes or really any quotable lines I can think of from the newer films.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of what makes it timeless. Is you have all these generations of people looking back now and finding something else to take from them.
What I will say is like they had the practical effects. I agree do hold up, especially like the story about how many takes they did for the tray at the lunch place. So I do think the effects mostly hold up. Maybe not Salmon in the third movie, but we'll get to that movie.
The first one is like it's also so special because there wasn't really at that point like a superhero movie like in this scale.
Right.
Like we've said before here, there had been like Blade and I think X-Men came out a
Yep.
couple of years
Yeah. Yeah.
before.
X Men was right before, I think.
X Men had a budget of like $30,000. It was
Wow.
very small. I mean, I'm not even joking. I think it was less than 40,000. I'm sorry. Did I say 30,000? 30
Yeah.
No,
million.
30
I
million.
was gonna
Yeah.
say.
That's why I laughed because it's the 30,000. I thought you were like,
No, I wasn't making a joke for once, but I got there.
Because before then we had like Batman and Superman. Those were the
Yeah.
big ones that we had on the big screen. And but I think as a modern superhero movie, this is really like the first example that's not like a crazy team up like the X-Men movie is. And like I think we do have to appreciate it for that at least. I appreciate it for a lot more, but like um yeah, like the quintessential origin movie in my opinion. Like the even though I don't put it as one of the best ones ever, that's that spot is held up by one we'll talk about soon. But yeah, it's still like one of the best origins that we have.
Yeah, I think for me the campiness kind of like adds to it. I think, yeah, because
Yeah,
it's like
100%.
Adam said, it's an intentional camp, right? Like it gives it a very distinct tone to it. It's a very because it's very Sam Raimi, which again, like he said, a lot of MCU movies nowadays they feel like they're directed by like 50 different people who are saying this is where the story needs to go in the future. So we got to add like I think I liked Shang-Chi, for example. Shang-Chi's a great example because I like the movie.
Shang-Chi.
I think it's a
Yeah, I
great
did
movie.
too.
I think
I
it's
liked it
entertaining.
too.
Yeah,
Yeah, same.
but there's obviously some parts in there I can see where maybe the committee, like the MCU higher ups, decided you need to add this in, like the subway train fight, right? Like they're fighting, they're doing all these cool kung fu moves, and then it's a cool sequence. But then then the guy with the like sword hand, he cuts the train open, and then it starts
Face
like
to face.
corrading out of control, and it was like I think what might have happened there. I'm not saying what really did happen, but it looks like what happened is the MCU decided this needs a big CGI part of it, like add more interestingness into it. It's a cool sequence. It still works. I still think it's a cool scene, but maybe like there is supposed to be a kung fu fight, and then they decided make more CGI, make it bigger, and then like all the jokes. A lot of times there'll be a serious moment undercut by a joke, which is what the MCU is kind of infamous for at this point. But like the director, I forget the director's name of Shang-Chi. Do you guys remember who the director
Destin
is?
Daniel Craig.
Daniel
Yeah,
Destin.
that's Daniel Cretton.
That's
Yeah,
the
right.
Daniel Craig.
Yeah, he directed the Glass King. What was the
The Glass Castle.
Glass Castle? Yeah, like I haven't seen his movies, but I don't know what his distinct style is because Shang-Chi feels like just another MCU movie. It's still entertaining. I still think it's a good movie. Like I still give it a positive. I think it's a great movie. I like Simu Liu or as Shang-Chi. I think he's a great character. I love the villain. It's a cool fight scene between him and the villain. I love the movie, but it doesn't feel very distinct in light of the other MCU movies. Spider-Man 2002, Spider-Man 2 2004, and Spider-Man 3 2007. They feel like you can tell, like Adam said, you can tell that one person directed it. You could know exactly who that person is because it's Sam Raimi,
Yeah.
and his Sam Raimi isms are all over the movies. He has a very distinct style. So at this time, it's just like that's what makes it special to me is that it's very distinct. Like you can
Yeah,
tell Sam Raimi did
It's
this
James
movie.
Gunn. It's James Gunn with Guardians of the
Yes,
Galaxy.
exactly. Yeah. Like when you watch Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 or any of the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, you can tell this is James Gunn's style, and you love it or hate it. I used to not like his style as much. I didn't think he was particularly amazing until I saw Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. That really turned my perspective on James Gunn around to say I think his distinct style is really cool. And that's just really something special. As we all know, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 was, incredible, amazing.
Right.
Yeah.
Because he wrote the script before the Endgame even came out, right? Like he wrote it and had exactly what he wanted to do in mind. And we're just lucky that Marvel allowed him to see it through. It was great. But that's definitely what's happening here with these movies. And Spider-Man, as a character, always in the comics, was never really with the Avengers. He was kind of a loner. Like all the time, he's just by himself. So when they put Tom Holland in the MCU and he was automatically with the Avengers, I think we lost a little bit of what made Spider-Man special, which is that he's just kind of by himself. He has his whole other rogues gallery, separate from the Avengers. He's in his own little world over here fighting all these other villains that he has an emotional connection to. You really see that here in the Spider-Man trilogy. Like, he's just by himself. There's no other heroes in this universe. It's just Spider-Man. He's just fighting all these villains that he has an emotional connection to. And that's really something special from these movies that I really appreciate about these movies. It's really, it's
and I
really
think
special.
that's something they're trying to bring back with the decision they made in the end of No Way Home. Okay, so usually when we're finishing talking about one movie, we give it a score. This is a pretty old movie, so I'm guessing you guys have a score for this one, maybe pretty settled at this point.
For the Spider-Man one?
Spider-Man 1, yeah.
Okay.
So why don't we start with Gal? Gal, what's 1 out of 10 Spider-Man?
Y'all are gonna diff. Look, when I rewatched it, which was like close to No Way Home, I was like, okay, it's a solid 6 out of 10 movie. Like it was fun, but but maybe like 6.5. So, maybe I'm just harsh on it because of the because of those parts that don't age well. Like, but I did find myself able to like embrace the silliness a little more. Like I love when Willem Dafoe is just like, "Don't tell Harry," and then he just like falls over. Uh, or, like there are some good moments. I just, especially compared to another installment in this trilogy and some of the other MCUs, which like was when my era of when I got into this. I just think in terms of rewatchability, there are usually other superhero movies that I flock to compared to 2002 Spider-Man.
Ooh,
What about you,
that's
Adam?
painful.
Yeah, it
Uh,
is painful, and I'm considering disbanding the podcast. But
yeah, I mean, I don't even know where to go from here. I feel like
That's the most negative I'll be today, I hope.
Okay.
my wife, for instance, doesn't like these movies because she thinks Tobey Maguire makes dumbass faces, and like it's just too cheesy for her. So I can totally understand where everyone's coming from. It really is an acquired taste with Sam Raimi. A lot of people
Yeah.
happen to like it, but there's also a good amount of people that are like, "What are we doing here? What is this all about?" I don't like doing ratings. I do on Letterboxd, and every time I do them, even I'm like, is it 4 stars or 3.5? Like I really get into it, and it often changes. I've ranked the Spider-Man movies probably 5 times in the last decade, and every time my list is different. It's because it's so stupid. It's like where you're at when you watch a movie, how old you are, your environment, all of that comes into play. It's so subjective, but when I look at Spider-Man as just like a bottle episode, something that came out back in 2002, it really was revolutionary. It completely jump-started the superhero genre again, and then Iron Man, of course, would take it way past the goal line. But that was really the litmus test. So I think Spider-Man 1, I'm going to go a solid 9 out of 10. That's where I feel.
Eli.
That's where I feel good.
Yeah, I'd probably give it the same 9 out of 10. Yeah, definitely. That's it's. I mean, I still think it very much holds up. It's just a class. It's a classic. Like it's without it, we wouldn't have half of what we have today in terms of superhero movies. So it's definitely classic. 9 out of 10. Yeah.
Yeah, and why ruin this when we're in a in a good row? 9 out of 10 for me as well. So
Yay.
Nines out of tens across the board, all four of us.
yeah,
Yeah.
the
Yep.
four of us
Yep.
all
Definitely.
gave it a 9. That's great.
Uh-huh. I love
Great.
it. The right
Yeah,
opinion to have.
Mhm.
I agree with it.
Exactly.
It's the honorable opinion to have.
Yes.
I support your take more than I do mine. I just like
Well, it's kind of like
So
you look
Gal,
back on
what's
the
the
because
next
I'm
movie
less
we're
you're
talking
less
about?
likely to
Richard
get
Donner,
banned from.
So Gal, what's the next movie we're talking
No, I
about?
prefer Spider-Man over Richard Donner's Superman.
sure. I'm
Oh,
just
okay.
saying, like, you watch Richard
Okay,
Donner's
we're not
Superman now, that
talking
movie has aged like
about.
milk, but you can still look at it and get some
But
good
it's still a
stuff.
classic, though. It's
It's
still a
still a
classic. I
classic,
still think it's a
and
classic. Yeah.
it's absolutely a classic.
This
And there
one
are
is
And it's
really good. We
definitely
got the effects.
it's definitely entertaining. Who doesn't want to watch a guy run around in tights? You know, like
yeah,
just standing like this and doing silly things. Like that's it's entertaining at least. Definitely.
and the Lex Luthor is still phenomenal.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
All right,
We had a whole episode where we talked about how like Christopher Reeve was like dubbed over as a teenager, like all this stuff. Basically, next movie we're talking about is Spider-Man 2, and this was released in 2004, 2 years after the success of Spider-Man. Um, and it's directed by Sam Raimi as well. And in this one, we had Alfred Molina as the villain, played by Doc Ock. This one, I I don't remember it being huge in my childhood, but I remember watching it around the time that the Andrew Garfield films came out. And bear with me here. At first, I didn't like it, and now I do. So bear with me here. But I do think this one's pretty good, better than the first, because it's like I think Alfred Molina's performance like elevates it elevates like my whole memory of the trilogy just because when you look back at it, he's actually really sympathetic. You know, he's threatening and he has these voices in his head and he's deranged, but he's very sympathetic. You start with him and he's in the zone with his wife. Like he's not ill intentioned. And then this thing happens and he loses his wife and like his ability to be a regular man because he has this thing in his spine. Um, and so I think Molina did a really good job. I think the main thing that sets me off in this movie is the whole like um, Mary Jane leaving some guy at the altar for Peter, which I think was a little melodramatic. But everything else, I felt like y'all talked about Spider-Man having this big world to himself, and I think in this one you really get to feel like the grandeur of New York, just because in the MCU once you see the Avengers, like the other the spin-offs or standalones, whatever you want to call them, they feel slightly smaller just because you know there's a living, breathing world. Here, when Spider-Man's swinging around, you feel like he's embodying this whole world with that Danny Elfman music. And of course, we can talk about the train scene for a while. I think the visuals age really well in that scene. I don't remember how much of that was practical, but I think the part with the tower and then it goes down to the train, I think it's really rewatchable.
Yeah. With this one, I have a bit of a weird take on it. I don't worry, it's nothing that you guys are gonna hate me how we hate Gal right now. Uh,
right.
it's when I was a kid, I this wasn't my favorite. My favorite was the first one when I was a kid. Um, out of the three of them, because I think this movie might be a bit too sophisticated at points for a kid to truly like appreciate it. I don't know if you guys get what I'm coming from,
I was the
but like,
same way. When I saw it in theaters, I was kind of underwhelmed. It
yeah,
took another watch for me to really appreciate what was going on. And I think you're right. Sophistication, not sure that's the word because I don't think that when I
yeah, I
think of these
think,
movies, but
Pizza time.
it's more refined, I guess would be.
but for a 12-year-old, I
Yeah.
guess that's fine.
Yes.
But yeah, like but now after dozens of rewatches and all that, it is we'll get to the rankings, but like it is one of my favorites, and out of the Raimi era, it is now my favorite.
Mhm.
And yeah, like there's so many good things in this movie. That train sequence is probably the best action scene of the 2000s,
Yep.
and yeah, just like I love the melodrama in these movies. Again, it's something that Gal pointed out as something that he didn't like. I actually love it. It again encapsulates the moment in time that this movie came out, and the will they, won't they melodrama is like just really, really fun in a way to watch. in this movie.
When
Please
I
continue.
think of the Raimi trilogy, I try to push Kirsten Dunst MJ out of my mind. Like I always
Oh,
forget it. I'm like, this is a great movie, and
Yeah.
then whenever someone mentions that, I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. She, I can't stand Kirsten Dunst MJ. I actually can't. Like she's so annoying. Like actually, she's the worst. Does nothing to help Peter in any way. She's
The opposite.
I'm like she's yeah. Now that you mention it, I do not like that aspect. But again, I guess it's a part of the time. Maybe it's a staple of
Yeah.
the like she's the love interest and she has to be that way. I guess I don't know. She just doesn't. She really does annoy me. I can't stand her. I'm like, just go away, just go off and be with that other dude, and Peter move on to Gwen or something in Spider-Man 3. Bryce Dallas Howard is Gwen, much better choice in my opinion. But I do think Spider-Man 2 is it's definitely one of the greatest superhero movies of all time. I mean, it perfectly like after the first movie, you have the origin story, and now Peter's dealing with balancing Peter Parker life, Spider-Man life, and it was the first movie to do that on the big screen. We get some of that in this movie that I think we'll talk about today, Across the Spider-Verse. The other sequel does it as well, but this was the first one to kind of tackle that idea in the live action of Peter Parker balancing his life as Spider-Man, his life as Peter Parker, and you just see that here. Like you see the real struggle. You feel a connection to Peter as what he's going through. Like in this movie, I think he probably feels much more like a real person. Someone was it Gal think mentioned that you don't think Peter was a real person in the he acted like a real person in the first Spider-Man movie.
Yeah, I didn't feel like he was very realistic with his delivery. It was just like a little. It just felt kind of childish in that way.
pizza time.
Pizza time. Yeah, that's
Like when he was.
in this movie. I think there's in the story there's a much more real connection to Peter. That's kind of, I mean, none of us are Spider-Man, but it's relatable to us as humans, to have to balance our different responsibilities, that kind of thing. And he's still figuring it out. And there's some really cool action. Like they nailed the formula, or they nailed it in the first movie. They got the CGI, the story, or whatever. And in the second movie, it does what all great sequels do, where it goes bigger, but it also goes deeper, right? Like it dives deeper into what Peter's thinking, how he ticks, how these other characters work. It really it explores much more of what the characters are, and it takes them a step further in their emotional journey that really just works and is the next natural step from where the first movie left off. So I think as sequels, it's one of the greatest sequels of all time. Definitely one of the greatest Spider-Man movies of all time. Definitely holds up, in my opinion, to today's standards. And like you guys said, the train sequence, obviously very memorable, one of the most memorable sequences, ever created. Very, very good. I think it's great.
I like how Peter's like in every action movie. There's like a moment between the hero and the villain where the hero's like making a moral speech or whatever, and they're like, "What about doing the right thing?" And the villain's just like, "Too bad, I'm gonna do bad things anyway." But here he's like, "You're right," and he like literally sacrifices himself and tries to help. Um, which I think the redemption part that he gets those last couple of moments before he gets sucked into the MCU are pretty satisfying, and the whole like fireball action scene in the aftermath of that, like the last scene of him drowning before Doctor Strange opens a portal.
So yeah, and yeah, like you're completely right. Like the realness of it is just how much Peter's life sucks in this movie. I
Yeah.
think
Uh-huh.
that's why it's so relatable because he keeps getting shit thrown at him like
Yeah.
every 5 minutes, and
Uh-huh.
he has to balance that with like a new job and like having troubles with his boss and a girlfriend and well, not really girlfriend. Let's not get into that mess. Uh, and
Wait,
like
which
she
one
gets
was?
engaged right in front of him, like the whole thing. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Wait, which one's the one where J.K. Simmons is like, "You're fired," and then Elizabeth Banks comes in, and he's like, "Hold up, you're unfired." Which one was that? Was that this one?
All of them.
third one.
Yeah,
Really
that happens at least 5 times. Yeah.
That's in every Spider-Man movie.
Yeah, like he was supposed to reprise his role in the Amazing Spider-Man 2, and that didn't happen. Like he was one of the first ones to everyone agreed this actor and character pairing is so priceless they can never be replaced. In the animation, in like YouTube specials and in The Simpsons, even it's always J.K. Simmons voicing J. Jonah Jameson, and it's so iconic. And he's one of the best parts of the whole the whole trilogy. Every Spider-Man movie.
Him. He's fantastic, amazing, like iconic. Very good.
I think there's one point in the movie that like Peter asks him to give him his salary like a week early or something like that, and he just starts laughing in
Mhm.
like the
Yes.
most
Yeah.
maniacal way ever, it's
That's
probably one of
meme,
the
yeah.
in the movie, and I'm like, oh man, you really can't ask your boss about that, can you? And yeah, this movie I think it's probably it's still for me one of the best superhero.
I would just stan MJ for just a few seconds. Kirsten
Oh, okay.
Dunst is absolutely getting shit on right now. She's really she's the Skylar of Breaking Bad,
Sorry.
where everybody doesn't like her,
That's true.
but she's like the grounded character that has to like point out Peter's bullshit and get on with things. And I will say there's two scenes that she nails. One, when she's hanging upside down and she's in a wet t-shirt contest. Zendaya's not going to pull that off. I'm sorry. That was the dream come true for a lot of young men watching that movie.
Yeah.
Secondly, and more realistically, the shot that you pointed out at the end of the second film where Alfred Molina, is tearing everything down and Peter's holding it up and she finds out that he is Peter Parker. The look that Kirsten Dunst gives sells that entire movie. It is just so perfect how she reacts to that. It's like a top 5 Spider-Man moment. So yes, she is kind of boring and a stick in the mud, but you kind of have to have the straight man character to balance out the guy with the tentacles climbing the building, and the sage advice from Aunt May, who's completely over the top in the best way possible. I believe there's a hero in all of us.
Yeah.
It's so good.
It's MLK.
One of the best scenes in the first one is when she's spraying and it
Yeah.
blow and
Yeah.
everything blows up around her.
She's so Rosemary
Yeah.
Harris is fantastic. The cast
And,
in these movies are really good. And I heard some hate towards Franco, which I don't get. I think Franco is lovely
love
in these
Franco in
movies.
this
He's really good in
movie.
these,
In the
especially
third
the
one,
third. I think in the third one he's
crazy.
hilarious.
Who do we think's better though? Rosemary Harris or Sally Field or Marissa Tomei? How do we rank the Aunt Mays here?
Oh, that's a good question.
I love Seife, which is short for Sally Field in my mind. Seife is great. I would say it's Rosemary, Sally, and then the younger one, Marissa Tomei.
Yeah.
I think that's the
I'd
order
probably
of
agree.
importance.
I might agree. I love Sally Field as well, though. I
Yeah,
thought
she's great.
She was pretty good.
I thought they all fit pretty well for their respective tones.
Yeah.
So I guess we'll go into ratings. I would rate this one, I think, an 8. Compared to the previous one, I think it holds up a lot better. Just because I felt like the plot here was a lot more sympathetic, like you guys threw in, and it wasn't just like the sequel to the origin. Like there was some actual drama going on and some grandeur compared to the others. But here's where you guys are gonna lose me again. I see people ranking this next to like Guardians of the Galaxy and Logan and Joker all the time. For me, it's not up there, but it's still rewatchable.
Okay,
Okay. All right.
fair enough.
I give it maybe a 9.5. It's almost perfect, I'd say. I just can't get on board with Kirsten Dunst. I'm so sorry.
I'm gonna go in between you two for a 9.75.
Okay,
Oh,
Almost there.
that's high.
Very close to
really,
being perfect.
really breaking it down.
That's crazy. That's too much math for me.
Yeah,
Like
let's
point
keep it at
5s or
9.
zeros, that's good for me. Yeah, that's 7.5. What?
Just to derail this even further, do you guys have like what would you say is a 10 out of 10 movie for you?
Any
Anybody have
movie
one?
ever?
Yeah, any movie ever.
It really depends on the context.
Just want to hear your taste.
Oh no, Back to the Future,
Okay.
Ooh, yeah.
Indiana Jones 1 and 3.
The Empire Strikes Back.
Okay.
Ooh, yes, definitely. Oh
Really
man, I
low-hanging
don't know. Maybe
fruit, but that's fair.
I'm gonna have to go Nolan here. I'm gonna say maybe Interstellar. I'd say.
I love
Yes,
it.
I was about to say it, but I was scared because I would get judged. Yes,
Beautiful,
I have
beautiful
Interstellar at
pick.
10 out of 10.
Yeah, that's an easy
Thank
one
you,
to
Eli.
say.
Spider-Man 3 came out in 2007, also directed by Sam Raimi, also
Sure.
starring Tobey Maguire and Kristen Dunst, and an incredible performance by oh god, I can't believe I forgot his name.
Topher Grace.
Thomas Hayden.
Yes,
Thomas Hayden
Grace.
Church. Thomas Hayden Church was good. I liked it.
Thomas Hayden Church was actually better than Topher Grace. I'm sorry.
and
Topher
insane.
Grace is actually fine in the movie. It's just they made that terrible decision to give him fangs and have his head pop out of the
Yeah,
PG suit. That's
yeah.
when it's
But
really
Like-
I didn't like Venom in this movie.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like he became Venom, and then it's
Yeah.
like, why am I still seeing Topher Grace? Like,
exactly. Why is Eric
he's
Foreman
still here.
still?
Why am I not seeing Venom? It's
The problem is he
Yeah.
played Eric Foreman. I think that's the biggest issue with this casting.
Is that the 70s show character?
Yeah,
It's like my favorite Stan Lee cameo of the three, where they have the banner. I think it's the banner of Eddie Brock, and Stan Lee's like, I guess one person can make a difference. And when Stan passed away, a lot of people were posting that and like showing how much of a difference Stan made. So I really like that moment between him and Toby.
yeah, definitely.
so Spider-Man 3, like a lot of people shit on this one a lot, and when I was a kid, I liked it. Like when I watched it in the movie theater, I don't remember how old I was. Maybe 13, 14, something like that.
My son
And-
loves this
No,
movie too. I mean, you got Venom in it. That's really all you need at the end of the day for
Yeah.
a kid.
No, exactly.
Sony loves
he has a
Venom.
kid,
Sony loves Venom.
they love it. But me as a kid, I only needed black suit Spider-Man.
Yeah.
Having that
Yeah.
in a movie was like already made it a 10 out of 10 for me when I was a kid. So like the scene where he becomes Black Spider-Man, I was like, oh my god, it was like a dream come true for me as a kid. Later on, I hated it. I hated watching it every time. But now I kind of in this weird middle ground that I kind of appreciate all the darkness and all the weird stuff that happens in this movie. Even the most cheesy things, I have a good time watching. I don't know
Yeah.
really how to explain it.
I think no, it's fascinating to me. I know what I was gonna say. It's fascinating to me how people's perceptions of like the Amazing Spider-Man 2, Spider-Man 3, like these movies that for the longest time people just hated on all the time. These are terrible, terrible movies. Why this is stupid. And then like you get like No Way Home, Into the Spider-Verse, like these movies that celebrate everything about Spider-Man. I think it's really after like those movies that people like nowadays are in this like way of just being like, well, there's things that are bad about it, but I just really appreciate the movie as it is. Like people have really come to appreciate Spider-Man 3, Amazing Spider-Man 2 for just the way they are.
Unfortunately, Eli, it has nothing to do with that. It's people my age are living in fantasy world where we want to relive the glory days of nostalgia. And so it's all based on nostalgia, pure and simple. It doesn't matter if the movie sucked when it came out or if it still sucks. It's just, I remember that, and that's it. That's all it is. And that's why Disney is remaking all the classic cartoons because they sell incredibly well.
I think Sony's really nothing without Spider-Man, Like
Yeah.
their partnership with Marvel is what's keeping them alive right now. Like name a Sony Pictures movie besides Spider-Man.
Well, I mean, Men in Black International, of course, comes to my
Men in Black International, which bombed. I was about to say that.
achievements. I didn't even see that movie. I had no interest.
Like they put 3 villains in this movie, and in my opinion, the only one that's memorable or enjoyable, which it's in a very, very campy way, but I enjoyed Thomas Hayden Church as the Sandman. I feel like when you dig a little bit into it, there's a good archetype there. And Thomas Hayden Church, I think he did a good job. He's overall a really good actor. I don't know if y'all have seen this movie Sideways, which he was nominated for an Oscar for, but I'm going to shout that out just because I saw it recently and I have to find that opportunity to shout it out. But basically, I feel like he was the only interesting one. Eddie Brock, he's just like a cocky, hot guy who becomes a villain because he's, handsome white guy that's not Peter Parker and needs to get out of the way. 1 and 2.
It's obviously, you can tell which villains Sam Raimi had interest in doing, and which ones, or I guess which one, Sony was like, but we want Venom. So he had to set up and pay off a villain in the same movie that had just been introduced in this movie. Like, you can tell Thomas Hayden Church as Sandman. Like, one villain you can do that with, it's fine, right? And he had an emotional connection from the first movie to where, like, Thomas Hayden Church is the one who kills Uncle Ben.
That red cone was stupid.
I can see, like, I can see why I did
It
it.
was really dumb. Yeah.
Yeah,
For
it's
me,
kind of
it's
weird,
like the moment where Ray finds out she's a Palpatine. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
why? What did that add?
Exactly. Yeah, I can see because it added an emotional connection. It added that emotional connection between Peter and Thomas Hayden Church, right? Like Peter and Flint. Is Flint?
Sandman.
Yeah. Sandman.
Flint Marco.
Flint Marko, yeah, exactly. But like with Venom, he's just like it's so like it just Sony said we want Venom, so Sam Raimi was like, okay, I mean, I guess I'll.
So like Sony, they would say in the Venom movie, we want Venom.
Yeah, exactly. That's all. Sony, they're obsessed with Venom. I don't know what the problem is, but like, yeah, he was like, I guess I'll add him in. You can tell which ones he had interest in doing and which ones he just kind of had to. Exactly. Yeah, Venom makes a lot of money, so I guess I can see why they did.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say time has the ability to heal wounds, and for me, that absolutely is the case with Spider-Man 3. I don't hate this movie. I don't love it by any means, but it is a campy Saturday morning cartoon that you can watch and have at least a superficial good time with it. There is still some decent emotional beats, especially in the final act. We do get a good, at least, wrap up for the three main characters. Some nice closure there. Nice little, generic sunset moment where the camera goes away. But it is, it's Spider-Man. It worked. I do think I remember seeing this in theaters and X-Men 3, and both movies were such a letdown, like such a disappointment, especially X3. I was fuming about how bad that movie was. And now, all these years later, I can watch it. I still understand that it's not good and that X2 is like peak. But
I love X2. Sorry, but I love X2 more than Spider-Man 2.
I love X-Men 2 is one of my favorites.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. But they just had such good foundations for those first two movies in both Spider-Man and X-Men, and the third one's just dropped the ball completely. But if you take away the expectation and the fact that they kind of ruined the trilogy, which is a kind of a big deal, and just watch them as their own thing, not too bad. Not too bad.
No, it's like the stuff with Peter and Harry, I think in the final act very much works. That emotional connection there, that payoff of their relationship, where Harry at the end he decides to help Peter in the final battle. I think that works. I think
and
that
no look bomb throw is fantastic.
Yes. Like that fight between them was great. Yeah. I think their relationship works and the payoff is very satisfying. And Harry's sacrificing himself. So I think that part of the movie is really the center, and that's what I appreciate about it mainly.
Well, there's three movies rammed into one movie. You have the Harry relationship that could have easily taken an hour and a half film. Venom, of course, that should have had its own movie. I know Raimi for a while wanted to do this as a two-parter, but it just kind of everything that they decided to do is just getting thrown out the window.
Yeah.
Really and he was going to come back. He was going to come back and do 4. But because Sony pissed him off so much and wouldn't wait for him to properly get his script together, they're like, no, we're just rebooting the whole thing. We got to keep moving on
because
this.
Sony
like, again, I'm gonna do.
Sony was like, because they're like, in order to keep the rights to Spider-Man, which again is the only thing that makes Sony, memorable.
Right.
They're like, in order to keep the rights, like we got to get this movie out by this certain date. So instead of waiting for Sam Raimi to write a good Spider-Man 4, because he wanted to, have a send-off to the series that he was satisfied with. So, like, instead of waiting for him to do that, they just said, we're making Amazing Spider-Man 2, just so they can keep the rights to Spider-Man.
Let's start with Gal again, because I have a feeling it's also the lowest one.
When I revisited it back when No Way Home was about to come out, it's still silly, but it's not terrible, but it is a bit of a letdown. I'll say 5.5 out of 10. 5, maybe.
I'm going to go with just a solid 7 out of 10.
7.
Keep in mind we're coming from a 10 out of 10 with my previous movie, so there's a big dip there, but 7 out of 10, that seems appropriate.
Eli?
Probably 6. I'm gonna go the same with Gal actually on this one. Yeah, probably 6 out of 10.
Sure.
It's sad,
And I'll go with Adam. I can enjoy this movie a lot when I watch it, even though I can also be sorely disappointed at times. So yeah, I think a 7 on an enjoyment basis would work.
Beautiful.